My background, I like to say I'm a recovering journalist and a recovering educator, because from both of those worlds, I have learned things that have shaped what we do today. So this is really talking to you all about how media works and how to share your story on your own terms, because there are always things you can control and there's often things you can't. But just being clear about that can be really helpful. Let's see. So today we'll talk about our framework at Pictures Worth, which is our 3 A's framework, which is approach, awareness, and accountability. So we don't talk about the 5 W's, which I used to always teach, right? Because anybody with a cell phone can capture pretty much who, what, when, where, maybe not why, but did we ever really get why? So we've shifted it to think about approach, awareness, and accountability, and give you some ideas, and we can see if you know all this stuff already, we can skip past things, spend more time on whatever feels most helpful for you. So as traditional media has and hasn't evolved, what has changed in terms of social media, AI, mis and disinformation, and then what you can and can't control in terms of your rights, your messaging, and a checklist for the next time a reporter calls. Anybody of you been called by a reporter or need to give quotes about something? We'll start to get you prepared for that. And always happy to answer, like, keep it casual, any questions you have, any thoughts you have. What I'd love to do is real quickly just go around the room and have everybody say their name, what organization they're with, and what your personal superpower is. So I'm going to start with Joe.
Hello, my name is Bo Sherman with Community Shares, Greater Cincinnati. Manage 45 social justice organizations where we connect, collaborate, and build capacity. My superpower is, I want to say Superman. I always have an S on my chest because my last name is Sherman.
Yeah, I love it.
I'm Jeff Dye. I'm with Women's City Club. I'm currently the VP of admin for it, and I've been a president. I was the first male president of the Women's City Club. It took 106 years before that happened, so I broke through. And I'm really, I guess my superpower is the fact that I don't have a lot of boundaries. I am a boundary spanner. I think that's a good thing. I tend to synthesize what a lot of different people are saying while I'm being quiet, and then I come up with something brilliant at the end.
Love it. Yes.
Hi, I'm Roberta with the Greater Cincinnati Homeless Coalition. Was it just my superpower, or was there
Just superpower.
my superpower is that I can do anything with my children from
Cool. Excellent.
My name is Ellie. I'm also with the Greater Cincinnati Homeless Coalition, and I'm an intern, so I would say that my superpower is that I can open anything on my floor.
Beautiful. Thank you.
My name is Aubrey Safari. I am the Director of Development with the Homeless Coalition, and my superpower is anticipating needs and meeting them with little resources.
The exact person you want to develop.
That's right.
There. That's awesome. Thank you.
Make sure we don't fall into the cracks.
That's a big one. Thank you.
Wayne Gordon with Community Shares, both are recovering. But I'm also a recovering journalist. Before I got to philanthropy, I was a newspaper reporter and editor. And my superpower is ADHD.
Yes.
Although the same neurodiversity that makes me procrastinate and not want to do the things that work also allows the to identify patterns people don't see, and to be able to schedule multiple projects at the same time, both staff, in a way that neurotypicals can't.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Christina Hartley, and I'm the director at the Harriet Beecher Stowe House. And I would say my superpower is historical context. I can put anything into its historical context and tell you why that happened because of what happened before.
We need more of that in the world.
Yes.
Yeah.
Leah Hasker. I am a public ally placed at Found House. I'm the volunteer engagement
coordinator. And my superpower is being able to remain calm and get through emergency situations.
I've seen her do it.
Yeah.
Witness.
I am John Henderson. I'm the Fund and Communications Coordinator at Ryan Community Housing in their son's first of the year. And my superpower is probably being flexible and adaptable to handle a roll call of things as I am.
Welcome in the nonprofit world.
Thank you.
Yes.
I'm Tiffany Noel. I'm with Black Girls Stay Lit. And I'd say my superpower is my learner's mindset. How I recognize that the more I know, the less I know, and the more I want to know it.
You're all of that. Thank you.
So, my name is Dawn Singleton. I'm with YARP, Young Adult Legal Resource Program. That's for 18 to 38-year-olds with end-stage kidney disease. Superpower, I think, is having my relationship with God and empowers me to be able to be compassionate and empathetic towards everyone that is going through something. It's like I feel their pain sometimes. I'm like, oh no, and then it compels me to want to help them out. But I know them or not. I can read a story on Facebook or also police, going to their stuff, and talk with them, try to encourage them, motivate people to be better than what they are.
Hey, I am Devana. I'm with myself. I am a public speaker and I am also in media. I would say my superpowers, because I thought I had a few, is adaptability. I can adapt very well. Love, I love everybody. Like, love drives out hate, so I love. And then encouragement. I can literally change a mood. Like, you cannot be sad around me. It's not going to work. So,
Just try. Can't do it.
you can't do it, That's it.
Thank you. All right, thanks everyone. My superpower is curiosity, which, sometimes I will say orneriness and stubbornness, but today it's just curiosity because I feel like my mom taught me that you can learn something from everyone and anyone in any situation, and that is something I carry with me every day. So, okay, moving on. I'm so excited y'all are here, and I just want to take a moment to say how beautiful it is. Just take a minute and think about all of the tumult of the world, right? All the stuff that's going on that we can't control. We are in this room with all these amazing superpowers. And every room we walk into, everybody has a power that they're bringing to it. So even when we think about stories and communication and how we deal with people, I always try to come in with that mindset of not what's wrong with somebody or what challenges they're facing, but what their powers are and how to really acknowledge and honor that first, because that shapes everything that comes after. Because even in our darkest days, there's something in us that is powerful. So here's what our 3 A's are, how we think about every story we touch. Awareness is what you see, understanding how media works. Approach, we usually say approach, awareness, and accountability. Just switch it up for reasons you'll learn later. They're interchangeable, but really what your mindset is as you go into thinking about story is important, and then accountability, not just, I think a lot of times, especially in journalism and especially in my nonprofit roles, I was trained to think about who I was accountable to. It was either my boss, my editor, the reader, the bottom line of the organization, but not necessarily the person whose story I was sharing. And that accountability was not as much acknowledged, maybe just assumed, but what I think we all know is when we make assumptions about people, that's not necessarily good. So being intentional and aware is super important. And these all tie together pretty directly. So from the perspective of working in nonprofits, right, there's this whole idea of trust. How many of y'all have been quoted in a media story? Right? How many of you have been quoted accurately in a media story? Inaccurately in a media story? Anyone? Anyone inaccurately?
My example would be that it's, yes, technically it's accurate, but
Yes.
not complete.
Yes.
And that's where it gets very frustrating.
Right. So everything from I've had my name misspelled, my title wrong, quote wrong, and I'm somebody who's a journalist by training, so that used to really tick me off. And I would understand how the process works, and still it would be frustrating. So I think there's this sense of what is trust, and especially we in this room are representing often stories that aren't our own, right? So trust is huge because once a story gets out in the world, what can happen to it? Anything, right? We have no control. So this idea of who can you trust, who wants to be, did you all see the guy, I think he's from Kansas City, who came to Cincinnati recently and stood outside a bank downtown and filmed? Am I the only waiter or online person? Yeah. So this guy goes around the country, he's from Kansas City, goes around the country and he films inside banks. He just stands outside with his phone, he speaks filming things, right? And then he waits to see what the response will be. So I guess a lot of people watch this movie because people were coming out to downtown Cincinnati being like, hey, what happened there? The Cincinnati police showed up. It was not pretty. And now he was arrested, then released. Now he's filing a lawsuit against the city, whatever. So the fascinating thing that I found out last night is Bella, who's on the board of Community Shares, her husband is a branch manager in Covington. That same guy went to Covington. Did the same thing. Total different response. Hi, welcome. We got chairs and there's some snacks back here. And waters. So anyway, so when media is everywhere, it's so easy to see how even the exact same story can be spun in different ways, and then how that ricochets off into public opinion, public support, and then if you're trying to gain support for an issue or your place of operations or person, you can see how easily things can get twisted. So a lot of our work is around community building and trust building in areas where there has been very little reason to trust any sort of institution, including the institution of media. So what traditional media that has done and continues to do is what? Decide what qualifies as news. They're the gatekeepers, right? So they say it's news or it's not. And they have been guided for a long time by things like the news values I always used to teach my students. Is it timeliness? Something just happened. Is it controversial? Is there conflict? Is it someone famous or high profile? Is it impactful? What is the context of it? Which was always like the lowest one, was always my favorite one. You're like, what's the context? Why does this actually matter? Because there's this quote, and I think it was Mark Zuckerberg who said it a long time ago, which was that a dead squirrel in my front yard is more important to me than people starving. So that's the proximity argument, like is it something nearby? So those were the traditional news values. So you can kind of see why what gets covered gets covered. What it doesn't take into account is that now we live in a world where we're surrounded by media and everybody shares those things all the time. So there's a different responsibility for human stories that are going to impact people's lives beyond our telling them. So it's built around news values and often missing context, the values that people have, and the systems level humanity behind the story. I think everybody in this room knows that the people aren't typically the problem, it's the systems that are messed up, right? So how do we see that explained in those news stories? Not necessarily, right? It's 1 or 2 minutes. If it's a broadcast story, if it's online, it might be 500 to 750 words. That's about as much as we can hope people will read through. Well, maybe the first sentence. How many of us read past the first sentence? Very few past the first sentence. So there's a lot of different layers that go into this one. And I'm sorry, I would love for you to introduce yourself and say your name, organization you're with, and your superpower. Hello. Your superpower.
My name is Laura Kenny Porter. I have an initiative called the Maddie Project where I share the life and legacy of my grandmother Maddie. She's a civil rights leader, health advocate, mentor, business owner. She partnered with a lot of organizations. She got breast cancer in the late 60s and used that as her voice to help women and particularly in underserved areas to gain access and public trusting institutions to do so. So my goal is to share her story, educate the community around it, program. My superpower, gosh. I have ADHD, which I've been recently diagnosed with.
Welcome to the club.
I think my superpower, whether I've been learning, is that I'm able to focus in on something and really push through and do it until I'm not interested anymore. Thankfully, with the Yancey project, I'm very much interested in it.
Yes, that's great. And I think what's so awesome, because the goal of the picture's work is in many ways narrative change, right? How do we disrupt existing dominant narratives with more true, more authentic, more nuanced narratives? And a lot of that comes from taking something that people may consider as a deficit and flipping it on its head. So already we kind of see that in this room. Like I am I'm an urban Appalachian. My mom was born and raised in southeastern Kentucky. So I was raised to call a hillbilly. I was underestimated, all the things, right? And so a lot of those values that were kind of like weapons used against me. Oh, you're ornery, you're stubborn. Well, that means I'm very determined and focused, right? Oh, well, education's not important to you. Well, family is very important, and family that's loyalty. So loyalty is a huge Appalachian value. You may not win me over easy, but once you got me, good luck getting rid of me, right? So there's that back and forth that I think traditional media narratives often flatten, and that's part of what we talk about in order how do we help expand those narratives. And there's Desiree. Everyone, Desiree. Sorry to go on making your whole video. So I'm Desiree Mosley, is Executive Director of Workplace 60. Do you want to say a second, tell us where we are?
So we are in our creative hub. So Workplace 60 is a creative hub that hosts other nonprofits within the building, as well as other organizations who come in to workshops with us. But we focus on storytelling and narrative change. So being able to partner with people like Elissa makes this place amazing in so many ways. Kids as young as 5th grade all the way up to adulthood.
Thank you for hosting. The Pictures Worth office is upstairs, and we're so grateful to be here. So this is just going over what the sort of typical news values are, because I think sometimes we don't understand why we put values on certain things. So crime or conflict, whether it's timely, whether there's controversy, whether it's prominent, which is also proximity, and what the consequences are. Although I will say consequence is not really as heavily leaned on, because it's much more like celebrity news or trendy kinds of things. And the consequences of that are typically not that. The stakes are not that high. What we're not focused on in news is non-famous people. Context, right? Values, the beliefs and ideals that guide people and the organizations that are doing the work, and humanity. That bigger picture about how systems create the inequities that we are working to reverse. So these are some of the pressures that we think of why this is our awareness section, right? Okay, so why these things are happening. It kind of helps us put a context around why news is the way it is, even though it's broken, we still have to deal with it. So remember, media is a business, right? There's nonprofit news, guess what? Even nonprofit news has to raise money. So there's always some pressure on reporters in the traditional legacy media world around profit, right? Ownership is often unrelated to journalism and accountable to shareholders. That's very true in our local media ecosystem. Cincinnati Public Radio is an exception, and there's a few other exceptions, but I don't know if you've ever heard the old saying, if it leads, it leads. It's really old school, but it still is very common if you hear about crime stories. Why we are obsessed with crime stories? Probably because what's the most popular podcast? True crime podcasts. We're like moths to the flame. We love to see the blood and guts, right? Or at least that's the assumption. So that's one piece of remembering. The media is a business, but journalists aren't media, right? Journalists often don't control what gets published. They don't write their headlines. They may or may not get to see the final version before it gets published. So even if the journalist is the nicest person in the world, that doesn't mean that you can trust the story that the story they publish is going to be accurate or something that you want to share around, right? And I think most journalists who you would want to trust will tell you that themselves, right? Deadline pressure is real. Oh my gosh, I hear so much from young journalists going out. They have to file 2 or 3 stories a day. They have to file. Of those, they have to have social media updates, they have to have little outtakes, they have to have like reels and things they do now. The pressure is tremendous. And what do you lose when you're under that kind of pressure? The capacity to be thoughtful, to really be intentional about what you're doing. So a lot of it is, again, the systems we're working to shift are messed up, so is the media system. And clickbait is reality. You know, we've all done it. We've all clicked on it. Oh, I gotta see what that is. And then 5 clicks later, you're like, that wasn't what I said it was gonna be. I'm never gonna trust that again until tomorrow. So that's the thing. Nuance is often the first thing to be cut. And that's just the reality of we're in. So how do you deal with that? And how do you really think about what you can and can't control? So you can't control who owns the outlet. You can't control editors and producers. And here's the other thing, because I think a lot of times when we get approached to be interviewed, we'll be like, I'm going to talk about this thing. Well, the story's really about this thing. So your quote may or may not be used. Your voice may or may not show up, only in so much as it reinforces a point that story is designed to make, right? So a lot of times I would interview 5 or 6 people for a story and we'd quote 2 of them. I don't know if that happens these days, because I think those stories are like one-source stories where you talk to one person and they just print everything. But the idea is that the point of the story, unless you can be persuasive with the reporter, is typically in their control. And whatever you say in an interview can be used in any way by the reporter or story used by the outlet. Just something to be aware of. One of the things, I'll give you a nice example, horror story, in the 1990s, so it wasn't a century ago. I was working for a new company that was bringing this crazy thing called cell phones to market. Cell phones, it was crazy. And they were like, oh, you're a mom, you've got 2 little kids, let's have you come out and pretend to talk to somebody on the cell phone, because no one else had a cell phone. And I was like, I don't even know who I'm calling, right? So I'm out, I'm walking, I'm holding one of my sons, the other one's walking beside me, I'm on my phone. The story goes, oh, this is so revolutionary, this is great, look at moms, can work, they can do this, it's so awesome. Great. A few years later, a study comes out about distractions while people are on cell phones. Guess what footage they decided to air to go with that story, because they run it in their B-roll. All of a sudden, I'm getting phone calls like, oh my God, did something happen? Were you distracted? Did you have an accident? What kind of a horrible mother are you, right? But they knew my kids were like 5 years older at the time. But just so you understand the context of how legacy and traditional media view ownership of content, they own it forever. And journalists also don't typically have you sign a release form, because that's one of the things, freedom of the press, we don't have to ask for that, you're in public, you're fair game. Just be aware, because you can always ask better questions. And that's what I feel like my crusade now is to prepare people to be as informed and as able to protect their own rights as possible when dealing with media, because it's used a lot differently now. Let's see. Next. Consent, this is limited. following on that, right, consent rarely gets a real conversation. How many times if you're in a space, maybe somebody wants to talk to you, they may or may not tell you what the story's about, they may or may not tell you who else they're talking to, they may or may not tell you, and likely won't tell you sort of when or how the story is going to be used, they may not know. It's all that is fine, but you have the right to ask about all this. Who else are you talking to? Oh, it's good to know if my arch nemesis is going to be in this story as well, or someone who I know well is going to bash my organization or speak about something in a certain type of way. Like maybe I want my name in that to combat that line of narrative, or maybe I don't. Right? So you have control over what you can ask, right? You can always limit what you share. Don't get too friendly right off the bat. Lots of journalists are good and deserving and trustworthy or whatever. But there's always that, and I was the journalist who was trying to get people into that space before. Not to make it bad for them, but just to maybe you're just not ready to announce something yet. Maybe you want to roll something out on your own terms. Just be really conscious of that. And then revoking consent is hard because once you have actually talked to someone and you are on the record, then you are on the record. Again, responsible journalists will hopefully check with you about stuff like that, but often not. A big part of the picture's worth, we have a consent and a story partnership and a consent form because we believe that none of the content that media needs exists without us and the people in whom we are of service. So we have some power, we just haven't really used it. So what can we demand? We can demand things like a consent form, which you may not get, but you can also say, how are you going to use it? Are you planning on using this in social media? Where is it going to show up on social media? How will I know when this story is published? All those things are legitimate questions, and again, there may be no good answers to them. But when you think about who you want to talk to and who you want to share a story with, it's good to know what they can control, right? And if they can't even tell you when it's going to be aired or published, or hey, I'll keep you posted on that, we'll stay in conversation, then it's really a transaction and not a relationship. And when we think about how we want to be in the world and how we want to be respectful of other people, I think we need to lean away from transactional experiences whenever possible, especially for the people that we work with who are more of the frontline folks who's too often people want to hear the bad story, the horrible thing that happened, the drama, the trauma, right? And I think as nonprofit leaders, it's on us to be a guard against people being used in that way, right? For clickbait, for some other, to reinforce the systems that we're that we're trying to upend, right? Happy to talk with you about all the consent things because we're really using consent right now. And always, because all of a sudden we realize, okay, any of you ever signed a release form for anything you've ever done? Like a media release, whatever? What does it say? They own your stuff forever. In any universe that may or may not exist, right? Do you ever get a copy of it when you're done? No. Then what's the point of it? I'm always like, I'm like, that is so silly because I signed this consent form, but I don't have a copy of it, so what good is it? They have all of me. It's such a power imbalance that is so, and if as a nonprofit you don't realize that any conversation you have with people who are clients or community members is already has a power imbalance, right? It's already a transaction. So how are you working to even that? But like having a consent form that you just even don't share just feels fundamentally disrespectful. So just a little soapbox. Yes.
One thing that we just got asked to do recently, which was not from a media source, but is something to be taken as seriously, is a person who was doing research. Mm-hmm. And then we did sign a consent form, but then, the question is that going to be used appropriately? So it's not only media, but other places where your information, your stories can be gathered and used.
100%. Yeah, and how much control do you have over it?
Right.
Or at least you get notified or ask for permission. What kind of attributions are required, right? Like, is it thanks to, courtesy of, whatever, so that people can track that back to you? Is that something you want?
Exactly.
And do the people whose information you're sharing, have they agreed to that?
Right.
Right, all of that is part of a bigger database kind of question, right?